Today is a special episode, a little bit different than what I would normally do. More on like the documentary style, however you want to look at it. I'm a little underdressed for this episode though. Yeah. You see, 51 years ago today, July the 16th of 1969, three men made history. And yes, I'm talking about the Apollo 11 moon landing. Today, as I said, it's going to be a little different because today we're going to talk about how they got there. How Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins got to the moon. What led America to that point? It's going to be interesting. I've wanted to do this one for quite some time. I saw this shirt. It's a replica of Neil Armstrong's spacesuit from that launch, and I just knew I had to have it. And you can even get it in like a long sleeve, and the rest of it's filled out. You can get it in a hoodie version where it looks like you got the helmet on too. If you follow the channel, some of you may know, America's planning on setting men back down on the moon by 2024, within the next 3 years. On this day, 51 years ago, America completed something that nobody thought they would be able to complete. A human being actually walked on another planet. Because today is the 51-year anniversary of that historic launch, not the moon landing itself, but the launch. I thought we would go back and talk about what got them there. What led up to Neil Armstrong walking on the moon? From the beginning, man has always been interested in flight. Some of the early designs are not that good. Some of them are actually quite ridiculous. But it wasn't until World War II when German rocket engineers, using the plans of an American rocket engineer, developed the V2 rocket. Germany used the V2 rocket to flatten London, England in 1940. But by the end of World War II, the designer of that German V2 rocket had to decide who to surrender to. Would it be Russia or would it be the United States of America? Well, they worried how they would be treated if they surrendered to Russia. So Wernher von Braun, who created the V2, and his team came to America. And along with them came 15 tons of documents and paperwork and more than 100 V2 rockets. After arriving in America, von Braun would continue his rocket research, upgrading the German V2 at a test facility in New Mexico. It was here Wernher von Braun developed the multi-stage rocket. His earlier concepts had a German V2 rocket on the bottom with a smaller American rocket on the top. This marked the very first time German technology and American technology were combined. With World War II now over and the Cold War between America and Russia growing momentum, both countries knew the way to prove their superiority was by conquering the heavens. Both countries' military rockets were soaring higher and higher into the sky. And even though the two countries weren't battling it out on a battlefield per se, they were at war, a technological war, to gain superiority of space. It was communism versus capitalism, the Soviet Union versus the United States of America. The space race was born. Russia struck first, becoming the first to put an artificial satellite into orbit with their satellite called Sputnik.
Moscow newspapers were first. Then headlines around the world echoed the news. Russia had blasted a man-made moon into outer space. On every continent and in every land, the story of Sputnik 1 dominated the front pages.
Sputnik didn't even really do anything. It just released a beeping sound that could be picked up over shortwave radio as it passed overhead. But nevertheless, it frightened Americans. I mean, just think, if it had a camera on it, then it could take pictures and spy on America every time it passed overhead, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing Americans could do about it. 1 month later, Russia struck again by launching Sputnik 2 into orbit. This time, it carried life with it. There was a dog named Laika on board, and yes, you can probably imagine some horrible things happened. Russia never meant for Laika the dog to come home. At this time, America was still relying on the US military to develop its rockets. They just kept getting embarrassed time after time again, until the disaster that was the Vanguard. After Vanguard exploded on the launch pad, the United States government finally unleashed Wernher von Braun, and they tasked him with getting America out of the hole that they had dug themselves in and getting America into space. Within 60 days, Wernher von Braun and his team built and successfully launched the first American satellite into space.
Missile power, ignition, maintain, lift off.
America then decided they would no longer rely on their military, and they decided they would have a separate entity to handle all of their space rockets. And in 1958, with Wernher von Braun at the helm, NASA was born. Before NASA could really get off the ground though, Russia gave America more bad news with word they had launched Yuri Gagarin into orbit, and it was Russia that were the first to put a human into space. America didn't give up though, and 1 month later, America launches Alan Shepard, who would become America's first astronaut in space.
Too fast, T-minus 8 seconds and counting engine start.
Bolton liftoff.
All right, liftoff and the clock has started. This is Freedom 7, reading you loud and clear. Control is smooth. What a beautiful view.
President Kennedy, who was just as much in love with the space program as I am today, he began touring the newly minted space centers all across the country. Kennedy's enthusiasm inspired the country to take up his challenge and show the world what we could do.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
They once again turned to Wernher von Braun to develop a rocket to get America to the moon. Von Braun's favorite design, which would have been called Nova, it was massive, and it would have had the crew capsule and the lunar lander all in one piece. It would prove to be too costly, and they didn't even think they could make it work by the end of the decade, as Kennedy directed. So von Braun made some tweaks and came up with a design that would separate during the launch sequence to get rid of dead weight as it expelled fuel during the liftoff, causing the rocket to be lighter and more efficient. And that rocket would go on to become a symbol of US spaceflight. It would initially be called just V, and then later on it was named the mighty Saturn V. The Saturn V was going to be the rocket to get us to the moon. But before they could get there, they had to learn how to get there. They had to figure out how to do it. So while Project Apollo was being tested and designed, NASA announced Project Gemini that would teach us the tools needed to get us to the moon. To begin to understand the fuel dynamics and the multi-stage rocket design needed for a moonshot, NASA began developing the Saturn V. Weeks after the first successful test launch of the Saturn I, Russia launched their second cosmonaut into space. 25-year-old German Tito. He, to this day, is still the youngest person to go to space. He made 17 orbits around Earth, and he also became the first person to eat and the first person to sleep in space. To streamline and prepare for Apollo, NASA decided Project Gemini would need a more advanced capsule, one that could carry 2 astronauts. They would also need a larger rocket. So they opted to use the Titan II, which was originally designed to carry nuclear warheads. They also decided that all of the Gemini missions would have specific objectives that would need to be mastered to get us to the moon. President Kennedy, while on tour at NASA's new control center in Houston, Texas, gave another speech on the importance of getting us to the moon.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
And shortly thereafter, Russia again delivered more blows to America and set more space records. In 1962, Vostok 3 and Vostok 4 went up to space and orbited at the same time, working close on achieving an orbital rendezvous. Right after that, Russia sent up the very first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, and then another first with cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, who became the first to leave his space capsule and spacewalk. The game was all but Russia's to win. They had beaten America in just about every way to this point. But America knew if we were going to get to the moon, America still had to conquer these important steps. So Gemini 3 became the first to change its orbit in space, which was huge. Gemini 4, astronaut Ed White becomes the first American to spacewalk. Gemini 5 was an 8-day mission to test endurance. Gemini 7 launched next and set a 14-day endurance record. And then just a few days before its completion, Gemini 6A launched, and both the Gemini capsules flew right up next to each other, as close as they absolutely could get, to be the first astronauts to successfully accomplish a orbital rendezvous in space. Gemini 8 successfully docked with an uncrewed Agena target vehicle. Gemini 11 orbited Earth connected to an Agena target vehicle. And on Gemini 12, Buzz Aldrin showed that it was possible to work in space without becoming super exhausted. NASA was confident they were ready for Apollo, but it wouldn't be long, America would suffer yet another setback. But this time, it wasn't at the hands of Russia. Apollo 1 wasn't scheduled to launch yet, but the astronauts were boarding the capsule for an in-vehicle test on the launch pad, when a spark from underneath one of the seats ignited the pure oxygen atmosphere inside the capsule, and it took the lives of all 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. NASA painstakingly grit their teeth. They redesigned the Apollo capsule, replacing anything that may have been flammable, and continued on preparing Apollo for its first Saturn V mission. Apollo 4 would be the first test of the Saturn V.
Ignition sequence starts. 5, 4, we have ignition. All engines are running. We have liftoff. We have liftoff at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
They affixed cameras all over the spacecraft so they could watch how she reacted during stage separation, and she performed flawlessly. Apollo 8 was originally going to just be a routine orbital test flight, but just a few months before its launch date, it was decided that this would be the first moonshot. Apollo 8 astronauts Jim Lovell, Frank Borman, and William Anders would be the first to leave Earth's orbit and travel to the moon.
Mark. 9. Start ignition. Flame burned. Engine arm. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All engines running. Launch commit. That's okay, flight. All engines. Clock start, flight. Roger, cabin. Flight fighter, trajectory go. Roger, flight.
America was ready. People from all over the country flocked to Cape Canaveral for the launch. America had been waiting for this moment for an entire decade. And for Wernher von Braun, his whole life had led him to this point.
Six, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Here we got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on proper heading.
Well, there is some rough country over there. Something really peppered that one. Four forward, drifting to the right a little. Down a half.
30 seconds.
Forward, just. Okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Engine arm off. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Those astronauts walking on the moon came home with a treasure trove of information and science experiments. They also came home with a ton of moon rocks that were studied for years and years. And the United States even gave a bunch of those moon rocks to other countries just to make them feel like they were part of the success of the Apollo moon landings.
We'd like to share a piece of this rock with so many of the countries throughout the world. We hope that this will be a symbol of what our feelings are, what the feelings of the Apollo program are, and a symbol of mankind that we can live in peace and harmony in the future.
51 years ago today, astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins would clinch the space race for America and cement their names into the history books forever as the first man to step foot on the moon. America has long since quit going to the moon, but spaceflight has gripped the country again, unlike anyone has seen since the end of Apollo. Commercial companies now carry humans back and forth to space, and NASA is preparing for their next lunar mission in 2024. And it's absolutely incredible to think that my generation and our children's generations will hopefully watch in high definition as human beings walk on a distant planet again, just like our parents did 51 years ago today.
There's that foot coming down.
There he is. There's a foot coming down the steps.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Neil, we can see you coming. I'm at the foot of the ladder. The L.E.M footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches. It's almost like a powder.
Boy, look at those pictures. Wow. Armstrong is on the moon.
Yeah,
Neil
they're off the
Armstrong,
limb now.
38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon on this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It was an amazing accomplishment. Even still, all this time later, I don't know that there's many accomplishments out there that can top it. That's it for this video. I don't know if you learned something new today or what. This has just been a video that I've wanted to make for several years and just put it off. I just recently found this shirt and I knew that this was the perfect time to make it. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you're new here, go down and click that subscribe button. Take it a step further, hit that bell notification. That way you get notified every time I upload. I got some trips coming up. I'm gonna be gone for a little while out on the road. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Make sure you hit that notification though. That way you get notified every time I upload. If you wanna help support the channel, check out the links down in the description box below. Thank you all so much. I will see you again tomorrow. I hope you have a great day. Please stay safe and stay healthy.
Wake up!